Hello and welcome to Rock Your Block. I'm your host, Tia Young. Today we have an exceptional guest for you. She is an award-winning author, communication and boundary coach, and the visionary founder of The Conflict Queen, a self-care initiative that empowers women to break free from generational cycles and claim the life they deserve. She holds degrees in communications from Colorado State University, global and marketing research analytics from Southern New Hampshire University. She has authored several books, including Memoirs of a Broken Queen, Let It Go, A Journal for Self-Discovery and Healing, Speak Your Truth, Heal the Heart, The Broken Girl's Guide to Radical Self-Care, and Little Miss Somebody. Her latest book is The Conflict Queen, How to Build Boundaries, Slay Drama, and Break Free from Generational Cycles. I'm so excited to introduce you to author Christy Abram. Christy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Tia. I'm so happy to be here.
Good. How was that traffic coming in? You were coming in from where, Maryland?
Yes.
Yes.
Lots of traffic.
Really?
Like always. Still something I haven't gotten used to, especially coming from the Pacific Northwest. But
you got here on time.
I got here on time.
You got here
so
on
that's
time.
all that matters, right?
Right. That's great. Well, I have tons of questions for you today, so let's get started. Can you tell us about your journey and what inspired you to create the Conflict Queen?
Great question. So what inspired me is just my own family dynamics. I come from a family of very, very strong A-type personality women, lots of trauma in our family, lots of things have gone on. And so what's happened is over time, because that trauma was never healed, it's got cycled through and given to the children and so on and so on. So I've been on this journey to help heal this trauma in my family and help other people who've been going through the same thing. So that's why I've become a boundary coach and been doing a lot of the work that I've done over the last 10 years.
Right. Well, the book focuses quite a bit on family dysfunction and how to overcome it through some of the practical tools that you talk about in your book. Can you talk a little bit about that family dysfunction, you know, how it occurs, the type of things that happens in that?
Well, I think that it comes from all various things. Some people who have experienced loss in the family, maybe they have experienced loss through someone passing away, maybe there has been someone who's been assaulted in some way, and those, people have never been tended to. So because, especially with my family, having a grandmother who grew up in foster care, and then experiencing it also myself, and then my mother experiencing certain things, we never had an opportunity to heal those wounds. So we never learned to advocate for ourselves, never learned to communicate effectively. So what's happened is because we didn't have those tools, we passed those things on to our children. So I started to see that dynamic with my own children, and knew that it was something that needed to be healed because I didn't want to give it to my grandchildren and so on and so on. So I think that for trauma or just for dysfunction, it can show up in various different ways in families, but the important thing is that the work is done to heal those wounds. And so, folks can find the peace that they deserve and stop perpetuating cycles that are harmful and toxic.
Right. Well, as you are explaining, giving your answer, I'm thinking back to my own family, and we had strong women in the family, type A personalities, like you say, but they never really shared anything that they went through. So my grandmother went through things I didn't even find out about until after she had passed. That would help. My mom went through things that we didn't see, things behind the scenes. Never talked about them. And I'm wondering, do you think that if communication had been better, that maybe that would help a little bit?
Yeah, I think, for instance, for my grandmother, she would have been turning 84 this year, and she grew up in a silent era. They were silent. It was kind of like you see things, you're quiet, you don't talk about them, you keep them in your family. My mother was a boomer, grew up in a generation where you work hard, but you still don't talk about the things that happen to you. So having parents and also grandparents who grew up in those eras of kind of like, you keep these things to yourself, you don't let people in your business, and also, if you are a person of color, if you're a Black person specifically growing up in the South, you learn to be quiet about things that happen to you, anything out of fear of, being persecuted in some way. So I feel like, because my grandmother and her people are from Mississippi, I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri by way of Seattle, but we just learned to be quiet. You just learn to be strong and kind of steam through things. But what's happening, with my mother and my grandmother is their body started to break down. They started to have health issues. They started to have a lot of mental health issues and depression and things like that started to kind of roll in at the later parts of their lives. And, I started watching that happen for myself as a young person. So, there is so many reasons why it's important to heal. A lot of them have to do with our physical health. A lot of them have to do with our mental health. But the majority of this has to do with peace of mind.
Peace of mind.
We have to learn that it's okay to talk about the things that have happened to us. It's okay to break cycles. Because what we're doing, when we are doing that work, we are ensuring that the people who come after us, our daughters and grandsons who come after us, have an opportunity, to do that work and be great without having to carry on the baggage that we've given them.
Well said, well said. Thank you for that.
You.
How does generational trauma play a role in our relationship?
It plays a large role in our relationships. I feel like in the professional world, I've worked government, I've worked as project manager and doing different things. And as I lead and been led by others, I've seen their wounds pop up in how they lead and how they communicate and deal with other people. You start to see it as you start doing this work and you grow your emotional intelligence. You start to see the people who still need to do that work. So I think it can grow into something that is so vast and dynamic that it starts to infiltrate other parts of your life, whether it's professionally, whether it's in your family dynamic, whether it's just in your own self. So this is why it is so important to do that work. Trauma is something that can grow and also can affect other people in your lives. Whether it is someone you work with. I know we've all had a boss that we can't stand, and we're just like, we don't understand why they're that way. Well, maybe because they have some unhealed trauma from their mother or their father that they've never dealt with, and so in turn they bring it to work with them and they give it to everybody else. Because one of the things I've learned as I've been doing this work when it comes to conflict, people who have unresolved conflict, they will try to go after dopamine from other people. So they're trying to get a fix. They need it from you. They need it from other people in their environments for them to feel good about themselves. So, I always tell folks, we're not giving away free dopamine. You know what I mean? We're not going to give it away. We want to give that to people who are actually, connected to us and want to do that work with us. Not the people who are working against us.
That's right. What, in your opinion, are the best methods to recognize and deal with conflict within the family?
I'm a disruptor, so I'm probably not the best person.
A positive disruptor.
I'm a disruptor. So I call things out. I call it out. But for people who, don't really like conflict, it may be best to do that work, kind of stand back for a minute and, listen. That doesn't mean that you need to take abuse from people. It just means that your pathway for dealing with conflict may be a little different from mine. So I say, hey, it's not okay if you talk to me in this way. I'm all about building boundaries with people. And you don't have to be nasty to build a boundary with someone. You don't have to be passive aggressive or aggressive when you build a boundary with someone. It's simply saying, if you continue to talk to me in this way, I'm not going to communicate with you. And if they continue to do that thing, that means you stand on exactly what you said and you walk away from the situation. Sometimes it's about removing people from your life just for your own self-care. And unfortunately, sometimes those are people we really love. Sometimes they're our family members, like our mothers and our fathers, or our children. As our kids get older, they become adults, they still have to, we have to hold them accountable as well. So that means, building those strong boundaries so people can learn how to deal with you and how to work with you.
You said something important as you begin to answer this question, and it was the word listen. How important is listening. That seems to be a skill
Very.
that a lot of people just don't have, and they don't recognize, they don't realize that
No.
they don't have it.
It's funny because I do a lot of posting on TikTok, and one of the things I talked about today is, to listen with your ears. And I know it sounds redundant, but a lot of people will listen to respond, and or to react. But what we're doing is we're listening to respond, and sometimes you just be quiet. Because maybe you don't need to speak to what their issue is, especially in that moment if it's heated. But also the thing that I like to say is people will tell you exactly who they are. They will let you know right off the back what their wounds are
And we need
if
to
you
believe
listen.
them.
Yeah,
Right? You
absolutely,
need to believe.
absolutely.
Yep.
If you listen to folks, you'll learn exactly what it is that they need. If you listen to folks, you'll learn exactly what the issue is. And sometimes the issues, 9 times out of 10, have nothing to do with you. But in situations where maybe you did cross a line, listening to that person instead of reacting may give you the leverage to do that self-work.
Right.
So you can learn how to mitigate conflict in healthy ways.
That makes sense. Can you explain the concept of trauma reenactment syndrome? What is that?
So trauma reenactment syndrome is actually a psychology term. And so what this means, the best way I can describe it, is when you've endured some sort of trauma in your life, and then you have someone who comes along and maybe they peel the scab off of that wound, and you continue to perpetuate that same trauma over and over again with different people in different ways. So an example of that may be, perhaps I lost my mother when I was young. I never really grieved fully. So my way of dealing with that trauma is to do drugs. I'm going to continue to do drugs. I'm going to continue to attract the people in my life who do drugs, who are going to open that door for me. So I'll have these dangerous behaviors that I'll continue to do. I'll continue to attract those people in my life that I don't need to. I'll continue to also maybe stir up drama everywhere I go. So in a way, some situation around them in their environment is causing them to react to some stimuli. So it may be, you look like somebody I know.
Right.
So unconsciously, I am living that through. And I've seen a lot of times with trauma reenactment syndrome is that you have a situation that pops up that, for instance, if you have an issue with your mother, you'll start to have issues with other women in your life because you are in some way reacting and reliving that until you heal it.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense.
So, I mean, I've seen in my own personal life, may have had a boss that I just could not get along with. And it took some time for me to realize she reminds me of my mother.
Yeah.
She reminds me of my aunt or somebody else. So through that person, I'm getting an opportunity to relive it until I heal it. And until you heal it, you'll continue to have those same traumas pop up.
Okay, good.
And you'll reenact them.
Christy, we're going to take a short break. We will return after these important messages.
I had to leave my parents. I had to move schools. I don't know anyone here. Everything keeps changing. Why is this happening to me? I'm sure glad you're here.
Change a child's story. There's a child in foster care waiting for a volunteer like you. Learn how you can help at casaforchildren.org.
Welcome back. You're watching Rock Your Block with my special guest and compelling author, Christy Abram. Prior to the break, we were talking about emotional intelligence. Christy, you were saying you might have a boss that you don't like, and maybe they had a death in the family, and just finish up on that.
Well, I mean, I don't currently have a boss I don't like. In the past, I definitely have. But emotional intelligence is a framework and a term that was created by Daniel Goleman. He does a lot of great work on this. And what essentially it is the ability to have self-awareness and empathy for other people. So when you're practicing not only self-awareness, but emotional intelligence, or EQ, or that you call it EI, you have the ability to say, okay, maybe I may be impacting this person in some way. Let me step back and listen. And let me work through this conflict in a healthy way. So going back to what we were talking about before, when we were talking about, do you have the capacity to say, I may be doing something to them.
Right.
Or maybe if someone is going through something, you not reacting to that, you having the self-awareness to say, you know, I'm not going to engage in this moment. Maybe I need to give them a minute. Or coming back to them saying, are you okay? Do you need some support? This is really about not taking things personally and having the bandwidth to want to do the work to grow with people in your environment.
Right, right. That's good. I like that. How does conflict affect our emotional well-being, and what are some of the signs that we need to be aware of and address as it relates to the conflict in our lives?
Yes, yes. So, you know, conflict can affect us, like I said before, on lots of different levels. So it can cause you to be angry all the time. It could cause you to withdraw. I don't want to deal with conflict. Be more passive when it comes to it. It could cause you to have depression and anxiety. If you have so much conflict going on in your life, you don't feel like you have anyone to support you, it can definitely show up in that way. So for myself, when I'm at a heightened place of dealing with lots of conflict, especially around family, I have struggles with anxiety. Yeah. So I'm constantly like paying attention to like my stomach. You know, maybe my stomach is upset. Maybe I'm feeling pressure in my chest. Maybe I'm just irritated and I don't want to deal with people. But this goes back to you paying attention to your own body. What is your body saying? Because our body talks to us.
Yes, it does.
If you're having lots of headaches, if you're having lots of anxiety, if you're depressed, looking around in your environment to see what is it that could be impacting me in this way, so you could start doing that work. So that goes back to the self-awareness piece when we're talking about emotional intelligence. You know, what is going on in my environment right now that is causing me to feel, not at ease?
Right.
You know what I mean? Because although we acknowledge that there are things that happen in the world and people, pass away and we get sad, being at a constant place of, uneasiness is just not something that we're supposed to be. Right. We're supposed to be inherently happy and feeling good about what's going on around us and also the people who are in our environments. So at any time that we are not perpetuating that happiness in our lives, we need to look around and see what is it that we need to remove.
Right, right. That's a good answer. Christy, discuss the link between conflict and generational trauma. What is that like?
So I would say that the link is, the things that have gone on in someone's family that have caused them to be in a certain place of conflict. So they're angry, like I said before. The generational trauma piece of it is the cause. So now we're not understanding how to communicate with each other. Now we're constantly having conflict with other people because we don't know how to communicate with each other. So a great example of this may be, someone who grew up in a household that didn't feel heard. Maybe they had a parent that talked down to them. Maybe they had another person in their family that talked down to them. They never felt like they can get a word in edgewise when they communicated with people. So now they are walking around with a chip on their shoulder and feel like they need to react to every single thing that somebody does. So everything somebody does is an attack on them, and they feel like they need to react to that. And but the foundation of that comes from having a mother, a father, a brother, a sister that they never felt like they can communicate with or didn't have a voice in that family.
Well, does that result in sometimes when even younger kids or older kids will throw things at the wall or do just weird things like that?
Yes, and you know what? I've seen this in my own life and with friends that the child will literally say, "You never listen to me. You never listen to what I'm saying," or maybe they just don't have the words to express what it is that they're trying to, say to them because they're young people. Yeah. So that anger piece of it is somewhere in that child's life they don't feel heard. We also see this as those little people who never were heard grow to be older people. Right. So now we have the young ladies who like to fight all the time, or they're at the grocery store cussing out the clerk, or bullying someone. Yeah. It does have a lot to do with that, and those are unresolved traumas and cycles that they've learned from probably folks in their families.
What kind of boundaries do we need to establish to overcome?
I would say, this is going to be different for everyone. For everyone. For myself, it had a lot to do with me ensuring and making sure my voice was heard. So at any time that I felt like I wasn't heard in some way, I would say, this is how I feel. If that person wanted to say, well, you know, basically talk over me or not give me an opportunity to express myself, then I knew that I needed to say, hey, you know, I don't feel like you're listening to me. Is there a better time for you and I to communicate? Or I would say, you know, I don't feel like this conversation is going well. I'm just going to remove myself from the conversation. So I think it depends on that person and what's happening at that time. And also, if you're practicing that self-awareness, you doing that inner work to say, maybe, you know, I'm responding in this way because, you know, I didn't feel heard, or maybe I didn't have a voice, or maybe, you know, the way that my parents communicated with me were always yelling at me. So now when someone raises their voice at me, you know, it's reminding me of this thing that happened to me. So maybe the boundary for them may be, you know, hey, you know, when you yell at me, it makes me feel very uncomfortable. Can you lower your voice so we can have a productive conversation?
That's right.
You know, yeah. So I mean, it's going to depend on. It's going to be different for everyone.
What kind of advice would you give to someone who may be hesitant in confronting the person who I think of them as being somewhat abusive? Is there advice that you could give to that person that's struggling with what to do?
Absolutely. So the best advice that I have is, you know, to do that self-work and to learn what feels good to you when it comes to communicating. That person may not be someone who likes to deal with conflict head on. That person may be someone who may need to remove themselves from the situation and then, you know, communicate with them at a later time once they've processed. Someone like me is a processor, which a lot of people are. Yeah. You know, so if someone were to say something to me in a moment that I felt that was disrespectful, I might react in a different way, like, oh, like, well, why are you talking to me like this? Yeah. But if you give me that second to process, then my response to you is going to be different. And that's the same thing that I have to say with other people. I say, get themselves in a place where they feel safe, surround themselves with people who they know will pour into them, find themselves a therapist if that's something that they need to do, so they can get the tools and the muscles to have a real conversation with the people in their lives that may be causing them harm.
Right. Christy, what does your family mean to you?
Oh, they mean
because some of the book, maybe not all of the book, but some of the book probably, you know, you've got some personal history there. So talk about that. What does your family mean to you?
I do the work I do because I love my family. I do the work I do because I love other families. I want to see my children prosper. And I feel like it's my responsibility to teach them how to communicate and how to build boundaries and deal with conflict, you know, in the best way possible. Because what I've seen for young people, especially in, you know, the Black community, is not learning how to deal with conflict has cost people their lives. And so what if two people knew how to communicate, they had the tools, and instead of them going to get, you know, weapons or whatever, they learned to have the conversation and talk the things out. I feel like a lot of the things that happen in families are, you know, stem from misunderstandings, stem from someone not feeling heard, from someone not having the tools, and someone not feeling supported. So if I can be that, then I want to be that, so I can learn to, you know, so we can change. You know, the path for the people who come.
What personal experiences or lessons have you learned?
Quite a bit. You know, I've learned to deal with my anger in different ways. I've learned to express myself in a way where it's very clear, and I've learned to let go when I need to let go. If there are people in my life that are not pouring into me, or if people in my life who are not willing to build with me, then I've learned through my journey that these are not people that I want to connect with. And like I said before, sometimes they're family members. But I've learned to value my contributions to relationships and show up in ways that support people and also support myself.
Right. We have a couple of minutes left, Christy, but I want to get into your podcast because you do a podcast. Talk to us about your podcast.
So I have a podcast, The Conflict Queen, and it airs in Apple, it airs a lot of different places. But, you know, basically it's exactly what the book is. I'm giving tools for people to learn how to mitigate conflict, how to have, effective communication so they can live the life they want to live. I mean, it is not our responsibility to continue to perpetuate the cycles of people who've done harm to us. We don't have to carry around that baggage. So the podcast is really geared towards teaching people through even my own personal experiences how to work through conflict, because although I do this work and I'm a coach, I'm still having a human experience and I'm still dealing with my own conflict in my own personal life. So I'm very transparent on the podcast. I want folks to understand that this is how you do things. This is how you deal with conflict through real life examples. And then, I always open myself up to answer questions from folks if they have questions around how to deal with conflict, because this will be an ongoing process for myself and other people who have, toxic family cycles.
Christy, how can people get your book?
They can get my book on Amazon. My book is sold pretty much anywhere you can buy a book.
Okay.
So Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, you can get the book.
We have a minute and 18 seconds left. I want you to have the last word on the, talk a little bit about the misconceptions and myths surrounding conflict resolution and generational trauma, because I think that's important.
Yeah, I feel like, one of the myths is that, people never change and they'll never heal. And that's a big one, because I myself is a person who's dealt with a lot of conflict and also have probably impacted other people negatively throughout my life. And I'm in this place now where I'm teaching people how to do this work. So there is hope for our family members and our loved ones. Although they've done harm, understanding that they probably don't have the tools. And this does not at all give them, any excuse to be the ways that they are, but also it's important for us to have the compassion as we're doing this work and moving forward. So people can change no matter how old they are. And we have to give them that opportunity to do that work.
Well, thank you so much. It's been an honor and a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate it so much. Well, it's that time again. If you have any questions about today's segment, please see the information scrolling below. You have been watching Rock Your Block. Thanks for watching, and bye-bye.